This hearing will come to order. Good morning to everyone. I want to welcome you all to today's hearing entitled the Department of Energy Fiscal Year 2008 Research and Development Budget Proposal. We changed the meeting of this, the timing of this meeting this morning because of presentation for the joint houses at 11 o'clock, and we wanted to make sure that we had adequate time for you to get your presentations in and hopefully adequate number of questions. I will proceed with my opening statement and ask unanimous consent that when the ranking member comes in that we interrupt what proceedings are going on if it's appropriate to have his opening remarks. Seeing no objection, that will stand. Well, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all five witnesses. Thank you for being here today and testifying before the Subcommittee on Energy and Environment. The focus of our inquiry today is the President's 2008 budget request for research and development programs in the Department of Energy. And I know I don't have to remind anyone in this room just how high energy prices and calls for action to mitigate climate change have propelled energy to the forefront of public debate in the last few years. Our nation's energy challenges are momentous and incredibly diverse, and I'm pleased to see that the President's budget request for FY08 takes a number of important steps and even some grand leaps in pursuit of technological solutions to these challenges. However, one can't help but notice serious gaps in R&D funding for certain programs. While resources are lavished on some high-profile research areas, other valuable programs are left to languish. In a time of intense challenge, it is important that we keep all possibilities on the table. For instance, in the President's budget, hydrogen, solar, and cellulosic ethanol are beneficiaries of major funding increases. But this encouraging trend is offset by large cuts and flat funding of equally valuable programs in areas such as geothermal, hydropower, ocean wave power, advanced grid technologies, and even oil and gas research. Furthermore, the administration continues its trend of slashing funds for valuable energy efficiency programs that help states, low-income consumers, industries, vehicle manufacturers, and even the federal government use energy more efficiently. Efficiency must be regarded as another valuable source of energy. After all, the cheapest, cleanest, most secure, and most domestic energy is the energy you never have to produce at all. Enormous opportunities exist to increase the efficiency, intelligence, and security of the nation's electricity grid without simply erecting more towers and stringing more wire. However, the nation has not deployed these technologies widely yet, and research and development funding in many of these related programs has been cut in this budget request. The administration requests a very aggressive increase in funding for nuclear energy, primarily to fund Global Nuclear Energy Partnership, GNEP. Carbon-free nuclear energy may very well play a vital role in addressing our climate crisis, and it is clear that issues of waste disposal have to be resolved. But the Department must convince this Congress and the public that the billions it will cost to implement the program and deploy a fleet of these technologies is warranted and conduct full systems analysis for GNEP. I'm particularly disappointed to see that for the second year in a row, the administration insists on ignoring EPAC 2005 by failing to carry out vital research and development into ultra-deep water and unconventional drilling technologies. This illustrates a fundamental misunderstanding that both of what the program is intended to do and the need to expand domestic resources of fossil fuels. I'd like to acknowledge the special role of the Office of Science within DOE. Although sometimes overlooked in the greater energy debate, the Office of Science, as the leading federal sponsor of research in the physical sciences, plays a critical part in our nation's scientific and technological competitiveness. The Office of Science has a long-standing role as steward of large, world-class scientific research facilities. However, construction and operation of facilities has come at the expense of funding for actual research at these facilities. I'm glad to see Dr. Orbach plans to put this back on track. Furthermore, As the Department pursues plans for additional large-scale scientific facilities, demonstrable measures should be taken to assure due diligence in the areas of cost estimates and design. This gives everyone a higher level of comfort when multi-billion-dollar research machines such as the ILC are proposed to Congress. The FY08 request makes a commitment to the Office of Science that is essential to maintaining our economic competitiveness, drawing a new generation into the physical sciences and successfully meeting future challenges, whether they be energy-related or otherwise. In the end, it is encouraging that the President's FY08 budget request for DOE R&D programs takes a solid step forward. However, it is important that that step forward benefit all worthwhile programs, not just a few high-profile, exciting ones. Today's witnesses find themselves at the crossroads of intense political pressures and the technological cutting edge, and probably spend much of their time trying to reconcile the two. Never an easy task. Again, we thank them all and look forward to hearing their testimony today. And at this time, I'll call on Ranking Member Mr. Inglis for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got released from the American Legion, and now I'm here. And thank you for holding this hearing, and thank the witnesses for being here. There's a difference, seems to me, between simple spending and thoughtful investing, and that's what I hope we're here to discuss today. Simple spending just doesn't, it's maybe good, it creates an immediate impact, but investing creates returns in the future. And so I'm very grateful for the work of the Department of Energy and on these kind of investments. It really could change the game for us. So as we discuss the R&D budget today, we're really acting more as investors here. Investors who are looking at alternative fuel industries, for example, and seeing the payoffs that they could produce for us. And we realize that we have a great need to break free of an addiction to oil, and some of the work that you all are doing could help make that happen. So we're certainly not there yet. Obviously, more commitment is needed, and we're going to need to spend good money to accomplish the objectives that we've set out. I think that many of us want to see the market make some of these decisions about what fuels will work and that sort of thing. And I trust markets mostly. It's also true that some basic research needs to be done, and the people that are going to do that are in the Department of Energy and places like that. So we thank you for your work. I am particularly excited. The chairman mentioned we don't want to focus on just the high-profile ones, but one favorite one is the President's Hydrogen Initiative, because what a triple play opportunity to do three things all at once that every American, I think, wants to do. One is improve the national security of the United States by no longer being dependent on the Middle East. Second, clean up the air because the emissions would be water. And third, create jobs as we do that. And of course, South Carolina probably isn't thought of as a car-producing state, but that's what we are now. And we've got a wonderful company, BMW, that stands for Bubba Makes Wheels. And so Bubba's making a lot of wheels in South Carolina, and we hope that the BMW H7 starts sweeping the country, and if it does, who knows, maybe they'll make some of those in South Carolina. But it's an example of what exciting things can happen when people put money into research, and so we're looking forward to hearing your suggestions about how to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the ranking member. If there are other members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Dr. Raymond Orbach, Undersecretary for Science with the Office of Science. Mr. Alexander Karsner, Assistant Secretary for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. Mr. Thomas Shope, Assistant Secretary for Fossil Energy. Mr. Dennis Spurgeon is the Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy. And finally, Mr. Kevin Kolevar, Director of the Office of Electricity Delivery and Energy Reliability at the Department of Energy. As our witnesses should know, spoken testimony is limited to 5 minutes each, and after which each the members of the committee will have 5 minutes to ask questions, and we'll start with Dr. Orbach.
Thank you, Chairman Lamson. Mr. Chairman, Congressman Inglis, members of the committee, I'm grateful for the opportunity this morning to discuss the President's fiscal year 2008 budget request for the Office of Science. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Inglis, for your kind remarks about basic research and the Office of Science. The DOE Office of Science is the primary agency in the federal government for energy-related basic research. The office interfaces with the Department of Energy's applied research programs, represented by my colleagues here this morning, upon which our nation relies for both energy security and national defense. Our goal is to underpin the applied research programs with the finest basic science, and at the same time to energize our basic research with insights and opportunities from advanced applied research. Transformational basic science discoveries are essential to the success of the department's efforts in hydrogen, solar power, and biofuels. We are one department, and we have been working very hard together on strengthening the relationship between the department's basic and applied research programs. Let me say a few words this morning about the critical role that basic science plays in addressing our nation's energy challenge. 2 examples. The first is cellulosic ethanol. To make this biofuel cost-effective, we must produce ethanol from cellulose directly. The problem is that the lignins that surround the cellulose in plants inhibit currently available enzymes from breaking down the cellulose into sugars that can be fermented into ethanol. The Office of Science will be deploying 3 innovative new bioenergy research centers, studying both microbes and plants, developing new methods on processes actually found in nature to create the breakthroughs that we need. For example, our DOE Joint Genome Institute announced this week, in conjunction with the U.S. Forest Service, the identification of the metabolic pathways in a fungus found in the bowels of insects that holds the secret to effective fermentation of the sugar xylose, a key to making cellulosic ethanol cost-effective. Second, consider intermittent sources of energy, such as wind and solar and tidal. The key to base load electrical contributions from these renewable sources is electric energy storage. In April of this year, we'll bring together leading scientists and people from industry for a major workshop to chart a transformational path forward for electrical energy storage. We shall be considering supercapacitors and other innovative approaches based on the latest advances in materials and nanotechnology to change the way we think about electrical storage. Solving this problem is an enabling key for renewable energy to make major contributions to electric baseload generation. These are examples of our mission in the Office of Science: investment in basic research to generate transformational scientific breakthroughs for our nation. Supporting transformational research also means providing cutting-edge scientific facilities through our 10 national laboratories that will allow scientists from universities and the private sector to do the analysis that will give them advantages over their colleagues in other countries, thereby contributing to American competitiveness. It means educating, training, and sustaining a world-class scientific workforce, thousands strong, 25,500 supported by the Office of Science in our FY08 budget in laboratories and universities across our nation for the sake of our country's future. We are not doing this in a vacuum. Other nations are increasing their investment in basic science because they know that those who dominate science will dominate the 21st century global economy. To remain competitive, we cannot afford to fall behind other nations in R&D. To remain competitive, the President's fiscal year 2008 budget request for the Office of Science is $4.4 billion, an increase of 7% over the FY07 request. It's an important milestone on the path to doubling federal support for basic research in the physical sciences over the next 10 years, and an indispensable investment in our nation's energy security and America's continued competitiveness in the global economy. Thank you, and I'll be pleased to answer questions.
Thank you, Dr. Orbach. Mr. Spurgeon?
Thank you, Chairman Lamson, Ranking Member Inglis, Chairman Gordon, and members of the subcommittee. It is a pleasure to be here to discuss the fiscal year 2008 budget request for the Department of Energy's Office of Nuclear Energy. The Office of Nuclear Energy has made a great deal of progress in the last several years in advancing our nation's energy security and independence in support of the Department's strategic plan. It is my near-term highest priority to enable industry to deploy a new generation of nuclear power plants. We have also made steps forward in developing advanced nuclear reactor and fuel cycle technologies while maintaining a critical national nuclear infrastructure. Today, 103 nuclear reactors generate roughly 20% of America's electricity. U.S. electricity demand is anticipated to grow by 50% over the next 25 years. The equivalent of 45 to 50 1,000 megawatt nuclear reactors must be built just to maintain that 20% share. The U.S. is at a critical juncture in the future of nuclear power in the United States. Unlike many of our international research partners, our nuclear industry has not been heavily supported financially or politically over the past 30 years. Today, the need for increased electric generating capacity is clear and hopefully undisputed. Fortunately, we do have a growth option that allows us to have a diversified electric generation portfolio that includes a significant carbon emissions-free component, and that is nuclear power. To support near-term domestic expansion of the nuclear industry, the FY 2008 budget requests $114 million for the Nuclear Power 2010 program to support continued cost-share efforts with industry to reduce the barriers to deployment of new nuclear power plants in the United States. We anticipate the NRC will soon vote, actually I think it's tomorrow, on approval of the early site permit for the Exelon Generation Company's Clinton site in central Illinois, which represents a major accomplishment in the Energy Department's efforts to address the barriers and stimulate deployment of new nuclear power plants in the United States. With nuclear power as the only proven baseload producer of electricity that does not emit greenhouse gases, it is vital that our current fleet of reactors be expanded in order to meet our needs for carbon-free, dependable, and economic electric power. Any serious effort toward expanding global use of nuclear energy will inevitably require us to address the spent fuel and proliferation challenges that accompany such an expansion. To meet these challenges, President Bush initiated the Global Nuclear Energy Partnership, or GNEP, a comprehensive approach to enable an expansion of nuclear power in the United States and around the world to promote nonproliferation goals and to help resolve the nuclear waste issues. Domestically, GNEP provides a solution to the ever-growing issue of spent nuclear fuel. In conjunction with Yucca Mountain, GNEP provides a solution which outlines a closed fuel cycle where energy is harvested from the spent fuel before the end product is disposed of in a permanent repository. The spent fuel will be recycled in a manner that will be more proliferation resistant than current processes used around the world. A closed fuel cycle will also alleviate some of the burden placed on Yucca Mountain and will possibly eliminate the need for a second geologic repository throughout the remainder of this century. We reiterate, though, that no fuel cycle scenario will eliminate the need for a permanent geologic repository such as Yucca Mountain. Internationally, GNEP promises to address the growing global energy demand in an environmentally friendly way. A global regime of countries able to provide a complete portfolio of nuclear fuel services including Russia, France, and possibly Japan, China, and Britain, will provide these services to countries wanting to use nuclear power to meet their domestic growth in electricity demand without the cost and risk associated with nuclear fuel cycle infrastructure. By providing these services to other countries, we hope to dissuade future states from developing domestic enrichment capabilities like we are encountering with Iran today. The fact is, the U.S. is not currently positioned to be an active member of this global regime. We have limited enrichment capabilities and no back-end fuel cycle capabilities. Creating capabilities needed to participate in the global expansion of nuclear power will take 15 to 20 years, meaning that in order to become an active participant of the global nuclear expansion, we need to begin now. Taking those steps necessary enables us to better assure that the imminent expansion will be safe, beneficial, and will not promote the proliferation of nuclear weapons. If we fail to act, we will have little to say in the process. The Department requests $405 million in fiscal year 2008 to begin work on developing a detailed roadmap for implementing all aspects of the GNET vision. Mr. Chairman, we appreciate the support that we have received from the committee as we seek to address the challenges surrounding the global expansion of nuclear power. We remain confident and optimistic about the role of nuclear energy in providing a solution to our nation's energy stability and independence. I would be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spurgeon. Mr. Karsner, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Inglis, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the President's fiscal year 2008 budget request for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. The request includes $1.24 billion for EERE, approximately $60 million more than the FY 2007 request to Congress. To be clear, my testimony today on fiscal year 08 budget request is presented in comparison to the administration's fiscal year 07 request, not the final amounts that were eventually appropriated in the 2007 continuing resolution. The Department of Energy is in the process of preparing an operating plan for submittal to Congress as required. EERE received an increase in funding under the CR, as you know, and I'm grateful to Congress for its strong commitment to energy efficiency and renewable energy programs. The budget request addressed pressing energy security, economic, and environmental challenges facing our country today. Accelerating the development of renewable energy and energy efficiency technologies will maximize rational utilization of our resources and clean energy production. Much of EERE's funding is integral to the President's Advanced Energy Initiative. The AEI, launched in 2006, aims to confront our addiction to oil, reducing our dependence on foreign sources of energy, and commercializing emission-free sources of power generation. The technology investment is meant to change the way we power our homes, offices, and vehicles. In his 2007 State of the Union address, the President raised the bar further by challenging our country to reduce gasoline consumption by 20% within the decade, and advocated the 20 and 10 plan. The budget request increased funding for programs to help the nation achieve the 20 and 10 goal, including, for example, biomass and biofuels R&D, and expanding the availability of alternative transportation fuels. We must work to not only accelerate R&D for new energy technologies, but speed the adoption of technologies into commercial products that can become more widely available into the marketplace at a reasonable cost to all Americans. EERE is taking aggressive steps to catalyze the rapid commercialization and deployment of critical energy advances through innovative partnerships with lenders and investment groups, with our state partners, and with industrial leaders. EERE's overall budget request reflects the funding needed to meet these goals. The FY 2008 request for biomass and biorefinery systems R&D is $179.3 million, an increase of approximately $30 million. Biomass is the most viable renewable option for producing liquid transportation fuels in the near term, holding great potential to help reduce our dependence on imported oil. EERE will continue to support cost-share efforts with industry to develop and demonstrate technologies to enable cellulosic biorefineries. The proposed increase will also support cost-share projects with industry for enzyme development to produce low-cost sugars from biomass, and for improved organism development or ethnologens for converting those sugars into ethanol. For the Vehicle Technologies Program, the Department is requesting $176.1 million to advance development of increasingly energy-efficient and environmentally friendly flexible platform technologies for our cars and trucks. The program focuses on technologies that use significantly less oil and enable the auto industry to comply with reformed and modernized CAFE standards. Battery technologies have made significant progress towards our program goals, having reduced the cost of next-generation hybrid vehicle batteries in each of the past 3 years from almost $1,200 per vehicle at the beginning of fiscal '04 to $750 per vehicle at the end of fiscal '06. We expect to bring that down the cost curve further in the next fiscal year to $625 per vehicle, and to increase our emphasis on batteries specifically optimized for plug-in hybrids. EERE seeks to have battery technology ready no later than 2014 that will enable auto manufacturers to widely and economically produce competitive plug-in hybrid vehicles having a 40-mile all-electric range. Hydrogen is also an important element of the nation's long-term strategy for energy security and environmental stewardship. The President's $309 million budget request for DOE and the Hydrogen Fuel Initiative fulfills his commitment of $1.2 billion over 5 years. This portion, the portion that is under my purview, is $213 million, which reflects a $17.2 million increase over the fiscal 2007 budget request. The proposed increase will accelerate and expand the efforts to research and develop hydrogen storage systems and improve performance, and fuel cell materials and components to reduce their cost and improve their durability. Over the past 4 years, our research has reduced the high-volume cost of automotive fuel cells from $275 per kilowatt in 2002 to $107 per kilowatt in 2006, a major step towards the ultimate cost target of $30 per kilowatt for commercial production. For solar energy, the budget request is $148.3 million, a level that is nearly twice that which was enacted in fiscal year 2006. To lower costs more rapidly and improve performance, the Department's photovoltaic R&D, for example, focuses on those technology pathways that have the greatest potential to reach cost competitiveness and grid parity by or before 2015. And we're emphasizing efficiency with our Building Technologies program, which targets a long-term goal of cost-neutral, net-zero energy buildings, houses that produce as much energy as they use on an annual basis by 2020. And in the near term, our R&D has helped industry to produce a white light emitting diode, or LED lamps, which set a world record for LED brightness and efficacy in the use of a power chip. Our wind program focuses on reducing wind power costs and removing barriers to resource utilization to enable maximum market penetration of wind energy technology across the U.S. so that domestic emission-free clean energy may one day contribute up to 20% of our national generation portfolio. Our Industrial Technologies program leverages its innovative technology transfer practices and highly successful partnerships with energy-intensive industries, as well as supporting development of next-generation technologies to revolutionize U.S. industrial processes, including those for nano manufacturing that ultimately enhance our competitiveness and deliver dramatic energy and environmental benefits. My written statement, of course, includes greater detail on these and our other programs, but this concludes my opening remarks, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Karsner. Mr. Kolevar.
Members of the committee, the opportunity today the electricity delivery system, enhance the security and reliability of America's energy infrastructure, and facilitate recovery from disruptions to energy supply. These functions are vital to the Department of Energy's strategic goal of protecting our national and economic security by promoting a diverse supply and delivery of reliable, affordable, and environmentally responsible energy. The President's budget includes $114.9 million for OE in fiscal year 2008, which represents an 8% decrease from the fiscal year 2007 request. This includes $86 million for research and development activities $11.6 million for operations and analysis activities, and $17.4 million for program direction. I'll primarily address the activities of OE's Research and Development Program today. Our request of $86 million for FY08 will fund the following four main activities: high-temperature superconductivity, visualization and controls, energy storage and power electronics, and renewable and distributed systems integration. The development of these advanced electricity technologies will influence the future of all aspects of the electric transmission and distribution system. First activity I'd like to highlight is one to which the DOE has made a long-term commitment. This is the science and development of high-temperature superconductivity. Superconducting cables transmit electricity through conductors at temperatures approaching absolute zero, thus preventing resistance to electrical voltage, which allows large amounts of electricity to be transmitted over long distances with little line loss. Superconductivity, therefore, holds the promise of alleviating capacity concerns while moving power reliably and efficiently. Another critical piece of a resilient and reliable modern grid is enhancing the security of our control systems. Our visualization and control activity focuses on improving our ability to measure and address the vulnerability of control systems. The research in this area will allow us to detect cyber intrusion, implement protective measures and response strategies, and sustain cybersecurity improvements over time. Our energy storage and power electronics activity is a midterm research endeavor to significantly reduce transmission system congestion, manage peak loads, and make renewable electricity sources more dispatchable, and increase the reliability of the overall electric grid. This may be achieved through large-scale, megawatt-level electricity storage systems or multiple, smaller, distributed storage systems. Using our understanding from previous energy storage demonstration activities, we are researching and developing new advanced higher energy density materials and storage devices for utility-scale application. The program also focuses on research in power electronics to improve material and device properties that are needed for transmission-level applications. Finally, in fiscal year 2007, the Renewable and Distributed Systems Integration activity completed the transition away from generation technology activities and will now focus on grid integration of distributed and renewable systems in fiscal year 2008. This is a logical step in advancing clean energy resources to address future energy challenges. Mr. Chairman, as you know, OE also carries out mission-critical work within the Operations and Analysis subprogram. These relate principally to the implementation of EPAC requirements and energy sector facility security and recovery. In his 2007 State of the Union address, President Bush emphasized the importance of continuing to change the way America generates electric power and highlighted the significant progress we've already made in integrating clean coal technology, solar and wind energy, and clean, safe nuclear energy into the electric transmission system. Technologies such as power electronics, high-temperature superconductivity, and energy storage hold not only the promise of lower costs and greater efficiency, but also directly enhance the viability of clean energy resources by addressing issues such as intermittency, controllability, and environmental impact. We cannot simply rely on innovative policies and infrastructure investment. We must also invest federal dollars in the research, development, and deployment of new technologies in order to improve grid performance and ensure our energy security, economic competitiveness, and environmental well-being. This concludes my statement, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to taking committee questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kolevar. Mr. Shope, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it's my honor to appear before you today to present the Office of Fossil Energy's proposed budget for fiscal year 2008. Fossil Energy's $863 million budget request for fiscal year 2008 will allow the office to support the President's top initiatives for energy security, clean air, climate change, and coal research, as well as DOE's strategic goal of protecting our national and economic security by promoting a diverse supply and delivery of reliable, affordable, and environmentally sound energy. Let me begin the presentation of our budget with coal, our most abundant and lowest cost domestic fossil fuel. Coal today accounts for nearly 1/4 of all the energy and more than half of the electricity produced in the United States. Because coal is so important to our energy future, our proposed budget of $448 million for the President's Coal Research Initiative
related fuel cell R&D, and program direction accounts for more than half of our total budget. Our overarching goal is to conduct research and development that will improve the competitiveness of domestic coal in future energy markets, allowing the nation to tap the full potential of its abundant fossil energy resources in an environmentally sound and affordable manner. This year's request completes, 3 years ahead of schedule, the President's commitment to invest $2 billion on clean coal research over 10 years. Our coal research initiative is broken down into the following components. We are requesting $73 million for the Clean Coal Power Initiative, a cooperative, cost-shared program between the government and industry to demonstrate emergent technologies in coal-based power generation so as to help accelerate commercialization. Work on promising technologies selected in 2 prior solicitations will continue in fiscal year 2008, and we plan to announce a 3rd solicitation during the year. The first-of-a-kind, high-priority FutureGen project will establish the capability and feasibility of co-producing electricity and hydrogen from coal with near-zero atmospheric emissions, including carbon dioxide. FutureGen's proposed budget of $108 million for fiscal year 2008 will be used to support detailed plant design and procurement and other preliminary work. Technology development supporting FutureGen is embodied in our Fuels and Power Systems program. The program's proposed budget for fiscal year 2008 of $245.6 million will fund research and development for carbon capture and sequestration, membrane technologies for oxygen and hydrogen separation, advanced combustion turbines, fuel cells, coal to hydrogen conversion, and gasifier-related technologies. The high-priority carbon sequestration program, with a proposed budget for fiscal year 2008 of $79 million, is developing a portfolio of technologies with great potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The goal is to achieve substantial market penetration after 2012. In the long term, the program is expected to contribute significantly to the President's goal of developing technologies to substantially reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In addition, the network of 7 regional carbon sequestration partnerships and the International Carbon Sequestration Leadership Forum, established by DOE in 2003, will continue their important work, including vital, diverse geologic CO2 storage tests. Research and development carried out by the Coal to Hydrogen Fuels Program, funded at a proposed $10 million, will make the future transition to a hydrogen-based economy possible by reducing the costs and increasing the efficiency of hydrogen production from coal. We have requested $62 million for FY208 to continue the important work of the Solid State Energy Conversion Alliance, the goal of which is to develop the technology for low-cost, scalable, and fuel-flexible fuel cell systems. Consistent with the 2006 and 2007 budget requests, the Petroleum, Oil Technology, and Natural Gas Technologies Research and Development programs are proposed to be terminated in fiscal year 2008. However, the Office of Fossil Energy will continue to carry out important responsibilities in the oil and natural gas sector, such as management of the ultra-deepwater and unconventional resources research program mandated by the Energy Policy Act of 2005. In addition, Fossil Energy will continue to authorize natural gas imports and exports, collect and report data on natural gas trades, operate the Rocky Mountain Oil Field Testing Center, and oversee the Loan Guarantee Program for the Alaska Natural Gas Pipeline. Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, this completes my prepared statement on our research and development activities, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shope. At this point, we'll open our first round of questions, and I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes, but I will yield to the chairman of the Science Committee, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very good panel, and this is very informative. Dr. Orbach, you're the only member of the panel I've had a chance to work with, and I want to say that I'm impressed with your enthusiasm and knowledge of the job, and I look forward to working with you. Mr. Spurgeon, I have talked with a variety of folks inside and outside the nuclear industry, and by and large, I get the feeling, well, I don't get the feeling, they've said very specifically that they're not happy with the GNAP program, that they feel like you've said, or I won't say you, but that there's been moving targets set, that there really hasn't been adequate basic research done before the potential to make, multi-billion-dollar types investments, which might mean that we won't maximize those investments and don't feel like there's enough emphasis being put on yucca and storage. Do you feel any of that's valid?
Well, obviously, the emphasis on yucca, there is nothing in this program that does anything to take away from the emphasis on Yucca Mountain. Yucca Mountain is critical to any regime that we look at for nuclear energy going forward as the ultimate repository for nuclear, spent nuclear fuel. But what we are doing with GNAP is creating a waste form and removing the long-lived transuranic elements that create the long-term issue.
So you think you've done an adequate basic research now?
So what we have more research to do, but understand we've been reprocessing fuel throughout the world for 30, 40 years. There are active reprocessing plants, recycle facilities in existence in all of the other fuel cycle nations. So the technology is something that has been commercialized. What we're doing is taking it to the next level of efficiency and taking it to the next level of proliferation resistance. In that, we are still doing research, and that's a big part of what the budget request is all about.
I don't mean to be discourteous. 5 minutes doesn't last very long, and I'm going to be submitting questions to you and to the other panel members so that we can better understand what you're doing and better do our job. And I hope that you will all be prompt in getting us responses. Mr. Karsner, it's in your prepared statement, you acknowledge that the backlog of equipment efficiency standards and the test procedures that has developed over the last 12 years, with a little explanation for why and how this backlog has started and why it's continued. Over the last 12 years, how many efficiency standards have been promulgated?
I can return to you the precise number for the record. I think it's under 10 over the last 12 years.
What about one?
Okay.
Does that sound about right? The central air conditioning and heat pumps, maybe 1 out of 16?
My impression was that there were more than a single standard that had been promulgated, but
Is there anyone, do you have staff or anyone here that could help you with that?
No, we don't have the number for the last 12 years. We're happy to report back for the record.
Okay, with my understanding, it's 1. So how many more does that leave you to have to promulgate?
We have submitted a schedule to Congress to promulgate up to 17 over the next 5 years, and that should deal with both the backlog and the energy policy.
Now, is that a little out? Isn't that? I mean, aren't you already well overdue?
There was recently a GAO report published that said that we were overdue on every one of the standards for the 34 that had been prescribed over the last 30 years. So the department has acknowledged that particular problem, submitted a schedule to detail with that backlog, and since that schedule was sent to Congress last year, we have been 100% on time for every deadline that we have submitted.
Mr. Karsner, I'm sure you already know this. Even without being sworn in, it's a felony to mislead or not tell the truth to a congressional committee. So let me just ask you, have you felt any pressure in the short time you've been there not to move forward and promulgate these rules in an expeditious way?
I have felt the opposite pressure. It is a top-line priority of Secretary Bodman, and it is a top-line priority of my office, and we will continue that pressure to meet those deadlines.
Has O&D slowed you down any on this?
There is a procedure to go through concurrence. It is a very process-intensive. The process is very time-intensive, and therefore we have recently submitted legislation to the Hill so that we could shrink and collapse the critical path, particularly where we can cultivate consensus.
So you're being told full speed ahead, do it as quickly as you can. Is that correct?
And we are being given the highest priority attention that this program can have by both the Secretary and the Office of General
Yet
Counsel.
in 12 years, you've only promulgated one rule. You're behind by statute in all the others.
Yes.
And I think the Energy Policy Act directed the Department to meet statutory timelines. You're behind in those too, aren't you?
With all due respect, sir, that it is obvious that the department is behind not just 12 years, 30 years. So something systemic is problematic through multiple generations and administrations, and we are seeking to fix that.
Well, we hope you can. It's important for the country, and we'll also be submitting some questions for you. How's my time? No, I don't want to. I want to.
Go ahead and finish, and we'll start the clock over when I start mine.
No, that's okay. If I'm over my 5 minutes, then I'll.
You're not. Please go ahead.
Okay. I just, Dr. Orbach, I'm interested in the bioenergy research centers, which I think are important, and I'm glad you're moving forward with. But it's sort of a new area for you. It's going from research to actual implementation there, and you're talking about bringing in private investors. I'd like to learn a little more about that. You know, what kind of stakes are they going to get in this? What kind of return are they going to get for their investment? And if it doesn't work out, what's going to happen with these centers afterwards?
We are currently actually evaluating the proposals that have come in, which indeed have included the private sector. We have given them a 5-year commitment for $25 million a year, and the understanding that we have is that after the 5 years we will assess whether they have been successful. It's a new concept, you're quite right, for us, and so we're looking both at procedures, at effectiveness, and whether we can deliver on the investment. That's the reason why we want the private sector involved. We want this to get to market.
Well, I think it's a type of experiment that we need to be making, and as I say earlier, you seem to be on top of your game, and I hope this will be successful. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, just in the spirit of fairness, I think I'll recognize the ranking member on the Full Science Committee, Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to Mr. Shope, I can't see that far. I wish you'd bring that table a little closer to us, if you would. Mr. Shope, I have some questions that I need to ask you, sir. I want to talk to you about, do you know what I'm about to ask you about?
I'm anxiously awaiting.
The ultra-deep provision that I put in the last 4 budgets. I put it in 4 times as a Democrat, and Republicans accepted it. This last time I put it in as a Republican, and the Democrats accepted it. We've passed it and sent it to the President. He signed it. And now there's a move on to take it out of the budget. And to take it out of the budget, you have to have a bill go through here, and I love the President. I'd absolutely jump in the fire for him, but every now and then I don't agree with him, and I think he's wrong in trying to move the ultra-deep legislation and take it off the books, because it doesn't cost anything. It's going to get reserves that are known there. It involves technology from schools and universities. It's more of a research bill than it is an energy bill, but it pays for itself in known quantities of energy that are there. We just can't get them up, but we're going to get the technology that gets them up. It doesn't cost anybody anything. It's not a gift to Exxon or the big people, because they're not the ones that really look for it, and they can buy their own technology if they want to. Independents can't, but independents will do most of this work. And it's just a win-win deal, and I've not been able to impress anybody over at the White House with that situation, but everybody else I know pretty well agrees with me. Now, I guess what I want to ask you, and I know your budget calls for the repeal of the ultra-deep water and unconventional onshore research and development program. And that's, I think it's the President's request, and maybe the gentleman that he got from OMB that's there advising him. and wonderful guys, admire them, respect them both, but I don't hate the sinners, I just hate their sin on this type thing. That's a quote from Billy Graham. It's pretty good. All old guys are good to quote, you know. I want to ask you, though, an EIA assessment of EPAC concluded that this was one of only a few that would increase supply and pay for itself through increased royalties. I just don't know any way to better. It's going to get over $1 billion more in 12 years than we have to spend for it, and we get maybe 70 years of energy out of it. I cannot understand why anybody would want to repeal this. They sent it to, of all people, Ed Markey to repeal it about 3 months ago, or 4 months ago, or 5 months ago. The Democrats and Republicans alike gathered together and killed that bill, cleared off a place, and killed it right there on the floor about 4 months ago. I hope we're going to do the same thing this time, and I don't think we'll have a lot of repercussion from over there. But I just, you know, it pays for itself, and until that happens, it's the law of the land, and it's to be funded on a yearly basis. Can you please tell me what the status of that funding is at this time?
Yeah, yes, Congressman, I appreciate and understand your comments. There is a difference of opinion, however, from the administration as to whether there are adequate incentives for the industry to do this research on its own. And there are costs associated in the sense of foregone revenues that will be going towards the program. So we have submitted legislation to repeal that provision of EPAC once again this year. That being said, we fully intend to comply with the law as it exists, and that currently includes operation of this program. We did issue the contract to RIPC last year in December. We have established the advisory committees, the 2 advisory committees that are required. Members are now being appointed to that committee, and the program is moving forward with all due diligence and full force until that is repealed by this body.
Please convey to George Herbert Bush's son that I'm trying to help him. And, you know, like the little scout helped the lady across the street, but she didn't want to go across the street. But I'm trying to help him here and trying to get a supply of energy that might keep our children, your kids, and your grandkids from having to fight a war, because this country will fight for energy. And we don't have to. We have it right here if we can just reach out there and get it. I want to read, and not being smart aleck with you or anything, but Section 99H dot funding, oil and gas lease income. You're familiar with that section, aren't you? I think there's 7 places in there where it uses the word, and we put it in here this way and use the word shall, not may or direct. That we prefer that they do that. It says, and after distribution of any such funds as described in subsection C, $50 million shall be deposited into the ultra-deepwater and unconventional natural gas. You know where that is.
Yes, sir.
A little bit on down there later, it says, under this part, without fiscal year limitation, to remain available until expended. Even on the next page, it says, in Section D under allocation, from the federal fund under subsection A1 in each fiscal year shall be allocated as follows. Later it says 32.5% shall be for activities under Section 99A. Little later, 7.5% shall be for activities under Section. It's not may or precatory words, or we hope you will. It says shall, and I think we're going to defeat the bill that he sent over here. It doesn't give me any pleasure to do that. It's painful for me to have to try to do that. But I think we're going to be able to do it, and maybe we get underway with this, and I'd like to work with you in working this out, because it might prevent a whole generation of youngsters from having to get on a troop ship and go take some energy away from someone when we've got plenty right here at home that's clean. Thank you, sir. I respect you and I appreciate it. I yield back my time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now yield myself 5 minutes, and I want to continue that same line, if I may. I don't mean to be piling on either, but RIPC happens to be in my congressional district, and it's something that's important to an awful lot of folks there. And I joined Mr. Hall when he first introduced that legislation many years ago, and also to work to continue the effort now, because we do recognize that it is an important piece of legislation.
I'm even glad you're back.
Thank you very much. I am too. And obviously the President thought that it was important because he did sign it into law, and that's where I wonder about the difference of opinion. We did receive a letter from the Department and proposed legislation last week asking that this section of the law be rescinded. And so, you know, given the enormous hydrocarbon resources in these fields, it's foolish. So what reasons does the Department have for eliminating the ultra-deep program, especially in light of its elimination of oil and gas research?
Congressman, the administration believes that there is adequate incentives, particularly with the current price of oil, for industry to invest in this research and development. While there certainly is recognition about independent operators, it's always a concern that they don't have the ability to spend these types of dollars. The service industry that supports them certainly does, and the administration believes that when you have to look at the total availability of dollars as to where our highest, most important priority of work that needs to be done with taxpayer-funded dollars, this program, certainly there's other incentives to have that work accomplished, aside from using taxpayer dollars to do it.
So it's the belief that there is inadequate research being done by those companies now. If Congress doesn't rescind this law, and I don't expect it to do that, you made the comment, and let me ask again, will the Department carry out this research as it is instructed to do so by law?
Let me be perfectly clear, Congressman. We absolutely will do that. We are currently doing it. As I mentioned, we are fully supportive.
Then can you tell me why OMB is holding up the money?
The money, well, as right now, the RIPC contract money is starting to flow. As soon as we have the plan that's in action, RIPC is preparing the plan for review.
Is it the administration's position that it is complying with the law then, fully, right now?
Right.
The OMB has released all the money it's supposed to have.
It has released adequate funds to begin that process.
It hasn't released the funds that the law is saying that it should. The administration proposes to cancel out oil and gas research. Apparently, the reasoning that this R&D, with the reasoning that it can be done by industry alone. Yet, given the cost of oil and gas research, only the biggest oil companies can afford to do this research and deploy the newest technologies in the most technically challenging fields. So, how can smaller firms leverage federal resources for oil and gas research?
Congressman, again, we believe that for independent operators, particularly the service industries that provide those services to not only the independents but larger firms as well, will be able to provide adequate investment to continue research and development.
Can you elaborate on areas where industry maybe isn't currently conducting research, or?
I don't. No particulars are coming to mind right now, Congressman. Of course,
any real industry effort to explore methane hydrates that you're aware of?
There is international efforts that are ongoing with respect to methane hydrates. The department has funded some research in the past, and that research will be coming to conclusion, and the information that we will be able to yield from that research will further the research and development of hydrates.
I hope that you will convey the emphasis that at least Mr. Hall and I have placed on this. We think that it's something that's important. I personally am disappointed with the manner in which it has been handled at this point. And certainly would like to see things change and change very quickly with it. And at this point, I will recognize the ranking member, Mr. Inglis, for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Orbach, as I recall, the Congress made a commitment to doubling funding within 10 years. Is that right? And I'm trying to figure out where we are on that schedule. Several years ago, and I wonder, and this is a 7% increase, something tells me if it were gradual over that time, it'd have to be a 10% increase in order to hit the 10 years, but doubling within 10 years. Where are we with that commitment?
The President's commitment to double the funding for the physical sciences is on track. The President's request for 2007 was a 14% increase, and then a trajectory out to doubling. And so the President's request for '08 represents that trajectory.
So you think we can get there? And the Congress made a commitment too, not while I was here, but
there was, to my knowledge, the Congress and the President signed authorization for the National Science Foundation to double its budget. The President's initiative, the American Competitiveness Initiative, focuses on the physical sciences, which includes the National Science Foundation, the Office of Science, and also the core research in NIST.
Right. So you're content that we're on schedule?
Yes, I am.
I could always use more, I suppose, but that's I won't make you answer that. But now let's see. Mr. Karsner spoke of the 1.2 billion. Same sort of question. The President's Hydrogen Initiative. We're on track there. Have we actually appropriated all of the 1.2 billion, or where do we stand on that?
This would be the year that we would fulfill the 1.2 billion, and we are on track.
So the President's budget request would put us on track. The question is whether we follow through here in the House to deliver on that.
That's correct, sir.
1.2 billion. And of course, here's hoping that that's not the end of the initiative, right? We're not going to be content at 1.2 billion. In other words, we got to break through, I suppose, is the.
I wouldn't characterize it is the end of the initiative, the 5-year 1.2 billion, but it is clearly not the end of the hydrogen program and its robust future that we expected to continue growing to meet its technological readiness milestones, which are necessary over the next decade.
Right, helpful. Mr. Spurgeon, what holds us back from nuclear power, really pursuing nuclear power in this country?
Well, I think we are doing it at this point. The Energy Policy Act of 2005 was a major breakthrough relative to starting to eliminate some of the barriers that have been standing in the way of having new nuclear power. There's been an uncertainty of the regulatory process heretofore, and when you're talking about major $3 to $4 billion investments, you've got to have pretty good certainty that if you start down this path and try to finance this kind of a project, that you are in fact going to be able to get a license to construct and eventually operate the facility. So the standby support provision in the Energy Policy Act is very important in that. That's basically an insurance policy that protects the sponsor against regulatory and or litigation delays. New reactor type standardization is something that we have needed in this industry. That's something that we now do have, and we are supporting. What the department is being is really a catalyst for leveraging our public money to encourage private activity in the nuclear arena. So we've been operating under the 2010 program as a 50-50 cost share. So we're supporting the first plants through the regulatory process. We're also supporting both from a standardization, but from an early site permit standpoint. We're trying to get some of the environmental issues off the table before the major commitments for funds are made. And then finally, the last piece of this puzzle is to provide eventually nuclear energy is authorized to be part of the loan guarantee program that would go forward, which looks for ways to then allow plants to be financed, perhaps with a greater degree of debt as opposed to equity, which lowers the cost to the consumer substantially for the cost of busbar electric power. So we have the tools now, and those tools are working. We have some 30 new nuclear plants that are in one stage or another of consideration, many of them in your region, sir. Yeah. And we look forward to the first applications for a new nuclear plant this fall.
Perfect. Thanks, sir.
Mr. McNerney, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate the board. Your testimony's been interesting and informative, and I understand the difficulty of producing a budget under these constraints. I have some questions, though. Mr. Kolevar, I heard both you and Dr. Orbach refer to the need for energy storage, for superconductors, and for the distribution of electric power. But your budget shows an 8% decrease. Now, I clearly understand the need for a good distribution system, both in terms of reliability, as we've seen in the east, in the Northeast a couple of times in the last decade, but also in terms of distributing wind energy and solar energy that are intermittent sources. So how can you reconcile a decrease in the budget with the increasing need for research and development in that area? And also, is there any plan for construction of distribution systems incorporating this new technology, or is this still a paper exercise?
Congressman, the decrease in the FY08 budget is reflected in other programmatic activity, particularly in the high-temperature superconductivity program. In the energy storage program, in that activity within the office, the FY08 budget proposes a doubling of resources for the purpose of, as I mentioned in the testimony, pursuing both large-scale utility-size applications and then smaller R&D applications that would benefit principally distributed energy systems, distributed electrical systems. And so we do see these technologies in use today in limited applications. There is a lot more work that needs to be done. The Office of Electricity Delivery and the Office of Science collaborate on storage activities. Generally speaking, you'll see, while we partner on these, you'll see the line drawn with respect to the time frames involved. The work undertaken in Dr. Orbach's program is consistent with his program, more of a long-term focus. The work that we've done in the Office of Electricity Delivery has been really to demonstrate now the feasibility of storage programs, test them into the system, validate their capability, continue to support those applications to increase the feasibility of these applications. And having pushed a couple of these out in demonstration programs over the last 2 years, I expect that the program will spend more time on research and development with an eye toward rolling out some newer energy storage systems, flow batteries and the like in the next 7 to 10 years.
So is that consistent with a decrease in the budget?
Well, with respect to energy storage, sir, it is consistent with the increase proposed by the President for these activities, a little over a doubling of the monies involved.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Mr. Karsner, I'm very concerned about the zeroing out of the geothermal studies and research. My understanding that there's a report from the MIT that shows up to 25% of our nation's electrical energy can be produced from geothermal sources in the United States, and this would form a baseline as opposed to some other forms of renewable energy. So what's the justification for zeroing out that part or that research area?
Well, the study that you referred to, specifically a tester study on enhanced geothermal systems, obviously wasn't out or taken into account when this budget was formulated in excess of 20 months ago. But so to comment further on that, the historic and conventional geothermal technology that has been the focus of the program as a legacy of a program is not applied to the enhanced geothermal systems potential identified in that study. It really amounts to about 15 gigawatts of energy nationwide. That 15 gigawatts is being right now very proactively exploited in the marketplace very profitably by participants in the marketplace, largely based on Energy Policy Act provisions in policy that induced greater development and exploitation of the conventional geothermal. We will not foreclose on the possibility of emerging technologies, and we are reviewing the results of that study to see if it's worthy of integrating into future considerations.
How's my time, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you very much. Mr. Bartlett, Maryland, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. 5 minutes, 5 panelists. Thank you very much for cooperating with short answers. I might note, Dr. Orbach, that the 7% exponential growth does double in 10 years. So you are on target. We're producing enough ethanol to make a minimal contribution to reducing our dependence on gasoline, but it's had an enormous effect on corn prices. They have doubled from $2.11 in September to $4.08 in December. Tortillas are increased in price in Mexico, and they aren't able to buy as many, and my dairymen are dying because of these high prices. Who is looking at the potential in your bioengineering research and sustainability? Is that your responsibility or somebody else's?
Well, it's the department's responsibility, and we...
I would just encourage you to look at potential and sustainability, because, you know, the fact that you can do it doesn't mean that you're going to have enormous amounts of energy in the future. We still have to eat, and, you know, that is going to compete with the need for this energy production. Mr. Spurgeon, how many years do we have to operate a nuclear power plant to get back the fossil fuel energy it took to build it?
I don't have that number right off the top of my head, but it's not that long, sir.
Oh, could you please get that number for the record?
I certainly will.
I get wildly divergent numbers to how long that takes, and I'd like to have it from the experts what it really is.
Be glad to give it to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are you looking at siting future power plants in populated areas so that we can use the excess heat for district heating and with ammonia cycle cooling for refrigeration in the summertime, rather stupidly siting them where we have to use drinking water and cooling towers to dissipate precious energy?
Most of the new plants that are being considered today are located or designed to be located, or planned to be located, I should say, at the site of existing reactor facilities. Most of our reactor sites were originally designed to accommodate more units than currently exist on those sites. So this will be the first stage.
I hope that when we are really siting new plants, that we look at putting them where people live. By the way, if I sleep 4 feet from the nuclear power plant in one of our submarines, I have less radiation than if I'm laying out on the beach. And we really need to be siting these in populated areas so we can use the district heat. It is really pretty dumb to use drinking water, evaporate drinking water to dissipate heat that we desperately need in a world that's going to be increasingly energy deficient. Mr. Karsner, I had the privilege of leading a 9-member delegation to China just over the break at Christmas and New Year's. I celebrated New Year's in China. And they begin their conversation on energy by talking about post-oil. They seem to get it. We're having trouble getting it. And they have a 5-point program, the first point of which is conservation. You didn't mention that. Is conservation included in your efficiency? Or who has responsibility for promoting conservation in our country?
Well, conservation and efficiency, of course, are very closely linked. Conservation getting less from less, efficiency getting more from less, but the idea is using less in both instances. So we do have a responsibility. Our office was formerly named the Office of Conservation before it was changed to the Office of Efficiency.
Well, you know, conservation is 2 people riding in the car. Efficiency is using a Prius rather than an SUV. So they are different, but both of them have the same goal, that is using less energy and still live comfortably. Mr. Kolevar, you're responsible for energy distribution. How much energy will you be able to distribute after a robust EMP laydown? And I note there was an article just a couple of days ago about the threat from China and EMP laydown. Sir, is the answer none?
The answer would be 0 electrical energy.
Yeah, you're correct, sir. And I would submit that this ought to be a very high priority. A single weapon detonated 300 miles high over the center of our country would shut down all electric productivity for the foreseeable future. Am I not correct?
I do not dispute that. I don't know those numbers specifically, but the impact would be dramatic.
Yes. Thank you very much. Mr. Shope, you mentioned coal. We have 250 years of coal. If you just increase its use 2%, which we'll have to do better than that shrinks to 85 years. If you use some of that energy to convert the coal into a liquid or a gas, you've now shrunk to 50 years. And since energy is now fungible and it moves on a world market, If we share our 50 years of coal, just 2% increase with the world, that shrinks it to 12 and a half years. That's not much, is it?
I'm not sure I understand your question, Congressman.
Well, you know, we brag we have 250 years of coal.
Right.
So then don't worry about energy for the future. But if you increase its use only 2%, that 250 years shrinks to 85 years. And since you can't fill your trunk of the car with coal and go down the road, you're going to have to convert it to a liquid or a gas. Now, if you use the energy to do that from coal, you're now down to about 50 years. And since all energy today moves on a global marketplace, and we're going to share that 50 years of coal with the world, now it shrinks 4 into 50 is 12 and a half. So now we're down to 12 and a half years. That doesn't leave me very sanguine that coal is going to solve our energy future. Am I wrong?
Well, Congressman, of course, with respect to coal, that's one of the main things we're working on is making it more efficient, the use of it more efficient. And that's what our program is geared towards, is to get more energy out of the coal reserves that we have. But we do have ample coal supplies in the United States. I'm confident.
You think 12 and a half years, at only 2% growth is ample? Okay, I'm not sure it's ample. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I'm apologizing to all of our members for the timeliness of this because of this joint session that is about to start. We're going to try to rush through these as quickly as we can. I'll call next on Mr. Lipinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd appreciate if the panel members could answer some written questions that I'm going to submit right now. I just want to raise 3 issues. The last one is the only one I'll ask a question on, but I just wanted to first say to Mr. Shope, I'm concerned that the $79 million is not enough for carbon sequestration, and I just want to raise that issue and follow up with some questions on that. Mr. Karsner, I just wanted to mention that Representative Inglis and I have reintroduced our H-Prize Act this year to authorize the Secretary of Energy to establish monetary prizes for technological advancements in hydrogen energy. I think it's a smart way to go about doing it. I'm happy to see that there is a significant increase in hydrogen research also in the budget this year. But the thing I really wanted to talk about and ask the question on is to Dr. Orbach. And I want to thank you and the department for advocating for the International Linear Collider, specifically, housing it there at Fermi Lab in Illinois. I think this bring great benefits, and it's very significant for the United States to be able to have this collider, house this collider in the United States. I've spoken with Congressman Haster on this issue. Fermi Lab is located in his district. I talked to Dr. Oden, who is the director at Fermi Lab. Could you elaborate a little bit briefly on the progress of bringing ILC to Fermi Lab and the significance for our country of doing that?
Well, it will be very significant if we can bring it here. What we are doing in our 08 budget is doubling the amount of funds for R&D for the superconducting cavities and the other elements that would go into the International Linear Collider. We are in the process of developing an international agreement or an international relationship that would enable us to correlate our R&D with research and development in Asia and in Europe so that we can make it truly international. We're just beginning to work out the details of that, and we hope that will lead in a few years to the availability of the building blocks for the International Linear Collider.
Thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lipinski. And now I'll recognize Ms. Biggert, the former chairman of our committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple questions I hope I can get in. Mr. Spurgeon, I've said many times before that I support the vision of GNAP, namely to develop and deploy technologies to reduce the volume and toxicity of nuclear waste by recycling and maximizing the energy extracted from our uranium supplies. I am concerned, and I'm not convinced that the department is proceeding in a way that really is going to build public or congressional support for this important program, and that really does worry me. As you know, I'd be a lot more comfortable with DOE's plans if the department had completed a comprehensive systems analysis. And I know that you mentioned in your testimony that you're working on a systems analysis or on a variety of deployment systems alternatives, and you are conducting a program environmental assessments. I know because there was one that was held in Joliet, right near my district. So why can't the DOE conduct a similar programmatic systems analysis to help build support for the vision of GNAP? And why do you still believe that the commercial scale demonstration is the best way to proceed rather than the engineering scale demo, especially since there hasn't been a comprehensive systems analysis? And I know that, there was a cut in the budget last year by the Appropriations Committee because there hadn't been this analysis. And we just have to get going. It really concerns me that if you say, 15 years before we're going to be set, and, I think this is so crucial to our energy demands and to reduce our dependence on foreign oil.
I agree with you, ma'am. We do need to get going, and that's the whole point of the program. We are conducting a comprehensive systems analysis. Some of the decisions relative to precise scale will be an outcome of that. We are proceeding with the generic environmental impact statement, programmatic environmental impact statement, in order to move the process forward. And we're engaging industry because there is a great deal of worldwide expertise in this arena. So we are underway with cooperative programs currently with Russia, with France, with Japan, and we intend to exploit the worldwide knowledge in this area in order to leverage our own program to be able to take advantage of the technology that does exist so we don't have to reinvent all of the wheels here locally.
Well, I guess we need that since we are 25 years behind.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, we certainly do.
But you still haven't answered my question about
in terms of the scale?
Yes.
We believe that there are many pieces that need to be demonstrated yet, and that's what the R&D program is all about, associated with this program. There are pieces that need to be demonstrated at the prototypic or demonstration scale, and that's what we intend to proceed with part of this budget, end-to-end tests that will demonstrate the entire process. There are other pieces of the program, because they are so similar to existing facilities like some that I know you have visited, that are ready for commercial scale deployment. Now, the precise capacity will be determined as a result of our this year's evaluation and the systems analysis. It can, though, be built. These facilities can be built in a modular fashion that allows us to get started and expand to commercial scale as we go. So that's the conclusion is not reached. The intent is to move it as fast as we can, consistent with good science.
All right. And I just want to thank Dr. Orbach for the ACI. I think you and Dr. Bodman have really pursued that and the research on physical sciences, and thank you so much. But I can't leave this hearing without asking you about REA or REA Light. I know that it's still in the President's budget. If you could just tell me the status of that.
We will be, in FY08, having a competition for the design of what we now call the rare isotope beam. And that design competition will be the same as the siting. That is, whoever proposes the best design, that's where it'll be built. We have, when you receive the out-year budgets, when they go to Congress, you will find PED money in the out years for beginning the process. But the design right now is in a competitive situation, and that's what we're pursuing.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Giffords.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Karsner, briefly, I was pleased to see the President's '08 budget when it came to solar. I believe there's about an 81% increase, $48 million, coming from Arizona and a state with an abundance of sunshine. Certainly very good news. I'm curious about the President's initiative. I'm curious if it's on track, the obstacles that possibly you're facing, and whether or not by 2015 we're going to have photovoltaic cells that are competitive with other types of power. So if you could please address that, I'd appreciate that.
I believe it's not only on track, I believe there is, it holds great potential for getting ahead of that 2015 timetable, particularly in places with where we can unlock solar resources like Arizona and the Southwest, not just through photovoltaics, but you might note that we've also increased funding for concentrated solar power, which can increase base load generation and shape the power in collaboration with the expected results from storage capacity that we expect from Dr. Orbach's efforts.
All done? Thank you very much. Well, I want to thank everyone, and as we bring this meeting to a close, particularly thank each and every one of our witnesses for testifying before the subcommittee. I think it's been very informational hearing for everyone here, and our witnesses have given this committee a better understanding of DOE's plans and priorities for the coming year. If there is no objection, the record will remain open for additional statements from the members and for answers to any of follow-up questions that the committee may ask of the witnesses. With that objection so ordered, this hearing is now adjourned. Thanks.